Hello and welcome, everybody. Sorry for the 1 minute delay, and also apologies for being here on my own and not with Stephanie, as was proposed or presented. Sorry. Can you just do some housekeeping? Can you just let me know whether you can hear me properly and whether you can see me? Just put something in the chat that I know that the connection is working well. Let's have a look here. All good. Thanks, Sarah, for responding. Okay, then let's get going then, if all is working well. And I'm assuming those people are not responding, are not doing that because they know Sarah has picked up the baton, as they said. Let's start by sharing my screen. There you go. You can see my screen, if I'm correct. Yes. And you should see the first slide now about announcing the targeting changes for recruitment campaigns. That looks okay. All right, so first of all, we have a packed agenda today to bring you up to speed on those new changes. What are we going to be talking about? Just briefly on recruiting on Facebook, getting the basics right, because if you don't get the basics right, you won't be able to implement all the new changes. We're going to be talking in detail about those new changes. We'll also talk about what we have learned as we knew these changes that came into effect on the 7th of December. We knew they were coming. We were actually preparing for that. And we did some interesting tests, which we are more than happy to share with you. Finally, we'll talk about what you can do and how you should implement those changes, and maybe change your current recruitment campaigns or make sure your new recruitment campaigns are up to speed. Good. Now, and I haven't done so yet, my name is Mark Herman. I'm one of the founders of Simple. And what does Simple do? We help our clients with providing them with qualified candidates by focusing on passive candidates, as we mentioned before, through very targeted advertising on social media. So up to date, we have run about 6,600 campaigns. So I have lots of learnings from that, which we're eager to share. And we do all of that in a very user-friendly process, because we've built the software from scratch to do so. Okay, a couple of numbers, and we'll talk a lot about numbers today because we're number nuts, or very data-driven, depending on how you want to call it. So we analyzed about 11 million data points per month of those recruitment campaigns. And if you look at our customers, we have a nice mix of about 30% are more global corporate customers, but most of our customers are small and medium-sized companies, because they don't have the same recruitment marketing know-how that we have, that we can bring to the table. Good. I haven't said this yet, but please interrupt me with any kind of question you might have. That's the objective of today. We want to make it very interactive. That's why I'll be looking to my right here, because that's the screen with the questions. And that's also the screen with the polls. So before we go further, I'm just going to start with one poll. Let's put it up there. I just would like to know how many people have already published a paid recruitment campaign on Facebook. So you should see a poll on your right-hand side of your screen, where you can let me know whether you have already done that. That gives us a good indication on what the audience background is. Okay. That's good to hear. So most of you have actually done this already. I won't dwell too long then on why you should recruit on Facebook, because you seem to be convinced already. Obviously, when we're talking about Facebook today, we'll talk about, we actually refer to Meta, what is now called as Meta, which is a whole platform, including Facebook, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and the other logo you might not know, which is the Audience Network, which is another network of affiliates with Facebook that allows you to kind of publish your campaigns on there also. But why should you use Meta? Well, just in a nutshell, yes, you can reach active job seekers through the channels like job ads, like Monster, like Indeed. But if you want to reach the passive job seekers, and these are 80% of the market of which 90% have indicated that they are open for a new opportunity. So that's kind of a very important number to keep in mind. You can reach those on Facebook. I was at another webinar yesterday where they talked about red ocean, blue ocean. That's another way of looking at it. But basically, there's a lot of opportunity to use Facebook as your recruitment channel. Now, in order to do so, you need to make sure you've installed the Facebook Pixel. And I think I have another poll for that because, like we said, we want to make this interactive. So I'm publishing the poll now to check whether you've already installed the Facebook Pixel. So let's have a look on that. Okay, so we still have some people who are not yet aware of what the Facebook Pixel is. That's good. Look, if you have the slide to explain that. So the Facebook Pixel, which is kind of the name it's mainly used for it, is a little piece of code which you can put onto your website. And that will allow Facebook to actually track what is happening on your website after people leave the Facebook platform. It's totally GDPR approved, to be very honest, and be very open. Obviously, that means you have to kind of ask for cookie permission in doing so. But once you've installed that, it will give a lot of superpowers to your recruitment campaign, because you'll be able to actually retarget, meaning people have visited your vacancy but have not yet applied. You'll be able to retarget them with specific advertising. That's kind of, for those of you who shop on Amazon, but then, leave their shopping basket open and not buy the actual product. You'll probably have noticed that you'll see advertising for that product once you do move on to other sites. That's retargeting. You'll be able to track conversions. So Facebook will then be able to, in this case, conversions are applications or people applying for your job. If Facebook has that data of which candidate applies to your specific vacancy, that will actually help fine-tune your current campaign. So that basically it's a big booster to your campaign. And finally, you'll be able to build audiences, which is also important, especially in view of the new changes. Yes, the audience you can build are restricted, but you'll be able to actually use the data from people visiting your website, and how long they stayed and whether they convert. All that data you can use to build audiences to improve your current campaign or your future campaigns. So that data is kept for 180 days. So that's half a year. So you can use that data actually for all the campaigns you'll be doing in the next half year. Good. So if you're still not clear on what the Facebook Pixel is, I don't blame you. I'm going quite quick in order to kind of bring everybody up to speed. Go and check out one of our other webinars. We'll share the link to those in a bit later on. But we have a specific webinar on data-driven recruitment, where we go into detail on how to install the Facebook Pixel and what you should do. Now, good. And again, you see me looking on my right-hand side of my screen. I'm still hopeful you will have questions. Please do so. Otherwise, I'm just kind of have the feeling I'm here on my own. Even if you just want to know what the weather is in Antwerp, go ahead. Now, there's one thing I kind of want to make clear, because this is really going to drive our thinking and our approach to using Facebook, and also how to manage those changes. Is that what most people tend to do when they build a campaign, i.e. also a recruitment campaign, is that they would like to kind of have as little people as possible in their target audience, right? Because people then think, if I don't have a small audience to target, right, I'll be able to actually reach everybody, and I'll be able to reach the right candidates. So they put a lot of restrictions on the audience. They look, they're looking for digital marketeer. They will put digital marketing experience with the interest, experience with Google, to kind of narrow the audience as much as possible to, 50, 60,000 people, or even kind of lower, in the hope that this will help them to reach the right audience. And that sounds logical, if you look at all the possibilities which are available on Facebook to do it like that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, actually, that's not how you can use the real power of Facebook. It's actually better to choose a wider audience. So Facebook can actually target that wider audience, and then using the data coming out of your campaign, actually start understanding which visitors score better, which visitors are more likely to apply. Because if you give too many restrictions up front, Facebook will work within those restrictions, but actually you risk to miss out on some very interesting candidates which don't happen to fall into the categories you've selected. And I know this is a bit kind of weird, maybe if you're not really very active on campaigns, but what we've learned, if that's important, if you have the right data set, and if the basics are set up right, so if you're able to track what's happening, if you're able to track who's applying, then you're going to be better off with a wider audience, which is also one of the reasons why we're actually happy with the changes that Facebook announced. We'll come back to it in a second. I heard a beep, which means there's a question. Yes, that's a good point, Sarah. Well, so basically the point that Sarah is making is that if you want people from more than 30 kilometers around the area where you're applying, that risks to only be 60,000 people because not many more people are living there. I think what's important is also not only to focus on the people living there, but in the case of a recruitment campaign, also tag that you only want to target the people who are working there. That was already increasing your audience. And I think, you're asking here about your client only wants people from there. I think what we've learned, especially since we moved to the software bit, is that clients come into a search with very specific requirements, right? And actually, when a search is moving along, they start understanding that maybe their initial requirements were the proverbial sheep with five legs, then by actually broadening your search, also showing you have good candidates, which might be 40 or 50 kilometers. Just sticking with the analogy of the metaphor of the location, that might also bring good candidates, which your client might still consider, even if they're coming from further away. But you're right. But what's important then, Sarah, if you're limited to that 60,000 people from a geographic perspective, don't limit it further by, for instance, putting special interests in there. I think in that case, it might actually be better to just target that whole group. Good. Provided, and I want to stress this again, provided you're able to actually measure what's happening on your vacancy and who's applying. Good. Now, the thing you've been waiting for, the changes that Facebook announced. And without further ado, let me just check, because I think we have a poll on that also. Yes, who has heard already about special ad categories? Let me publish that poll. And let's see how many of you are aware already. Okay, good. A slight bias toward the people who are aware. I'm assuming that's also one of the reasons why you're here and to understand what that means. Now, this is the official announcement of Facebook, where they're actually saying that everybody's advertising regarding housing, and that means, housing, employment, or credit opportunity will be seen as being placed in a special ad category. Okay. Now we'll talk about employment in at length later on. Housing means everything which is related to real estate. So if you're selling houses, if you're basically looking for people to rent your house, you fall into this category. And with credit, is also quite broad. If you're selling credit cards, if you are doing advertising related to anything which is linked to finance, you'll also fall into this category. And employment is also quite broad. This also means it's not only if you're pushing vacancies for people to apply to a specific vacancy, but even if it's for internships, even, and this is where it becomes a bit of a gray zone, even if it's becoming for trainings, right? So if it's trainings to be trained to become a certain function or to be trained into a job, that's also going to fall into employment. It's only advertising, so anything you do organically or you just post onto your own Facebook page doesn't fall under this, but everything which is linked to advertising falls into this restricted set, right? Why is that? I think it's quite obvious, but obviously Facebook is kind of very focused on being seen as a responsible advertiser or as a responsible platform, which we can only applaud. And I want to make sure that people cannot discriminate by using or targeting specific or by excluding specific groups from their advertising. So that's basically the big thinking behind it. And there's a big risk here because if you may or may not know, Facebook continuously monitors what's happening with your advertising. If you upload or you want to start advertising, which is in the special ad category, but you have not indicated this in the beginning, because once you start your ad, you have to actually kind of tick a box saying you fall under the special ad category. If you do not do that, but you still launch advertising, you have a serious risk of actually your account being blocked. And if not blocked, at the very least, you will be impacted in the results. But the big and the real issue is you risk your account being blocked. And I can tell you that's not a good place to be because it basically means you're not even able to contact support because your account is blocked. Right? It's a bit of a catch-22. But you do not want your account to be blocked. We have had the issue, I think, 2 years back. In that case, our account was hacked, and therefore we were blocked. And it took us, I think, about a week or at least 4 to 5 days before we were back in business. And that's really because we knew, because we are a Facebook partner, we know some people at Facebook whom we could call. So you really want to make sure your account is not blocked. And to do that, that means clearly indicating to Facebook that you are pushing an ad or publishing an ad which is in the special ad category. Good. Again, I'm looking for questions here, but no questions yet. Now, and I won't dwell too long on this because, all of you have, almost all of you have experience with pushing Facebook ads. But as you probably know, you have 3 elements when you want to advertise on Facebook. At the top level, you have to define what the objectives of your campaign. The level below, it's where you define your ad sets. And in your ad sets, you're going to indicate and highlight which audience you want to reach, what channels, and how much budget you have available. So that's where you can say, look, I only want to be shown on Facebook, not on Instagram. This is the target audience I'm reaching. You define all of that at the ad set level. And then only then, at the level below, you define your actual ads. And you define, that's where you define your copy and your visuals. So the most impact will be at the ad set level, obviously, because that's where most of the targeting is done. But already at the campaign level, that's where you have to indicate. And then you see a screenshot here. So the moment you set up your campaign, that's where you have to tick the box saying, I am, as you can see here, publishing an ad for job offers, internships, professional certification programs. That's what I meant with the training programs or other related opportunities. And just as a tip, if you're in doubt on where your ad falls into the employment category, tick the box, right? Because we've had some experiences in the past where we thought it wasn't related, but it actually is related. So Facebook will be thinking broader rather than more narrow in this category. Good. So first of all, make sure you click the employment ad, and then also very important, below that, This will also impact the campaign, clearly indicate where you want to run this campaign. And this is a bit might be a bit awkward, but for instance, this has now been applied for countries in Europe, right? If for whatever reason you would be today deciding, I haven't checked because we have some people from all over Europe, but if for instance you would say, I want to start advertising in Guadeloupe or another country in Africa, you will not be linked to this restriction, right? So keep that in mind. And on the other hand, also, the choice of country will also kind of imply certain restrictions that might be different from country to country, but I'll come back to that in a second. Now, when you're at the ad set level, and that's, as I mentioned, that's where you do your targeting, you have, in the Facebook platform, a couple of different options. As Sarah already mentioned, you can work on location. You could choose age, an age group or gender for your advertising, and you can still do that if you're not in a special ad category. You can choose interests, and that's important, you can actually use your own data that you have collected on your own website or your own audiences. You can actually also use that data to target. We won't dwell too long on the data part today. Again, check out our data-driven webinar if you're interested in that. Now, if you look at the impact of these changes, clearly age and gender are out of the question. So you're not able to target anymore on certain age groups or define specific genders you want to reach. That train has left the station as of the 7th of December. And again, need I explain more? No discriminatory targeting possibilities can be taken into account anymore. And then on all other points, you have some specific impacts. Now, let's start with the first one on location. These are all the current location-based targeting options you had. You could actually go up to 1 kilometer if you would think that would be a good idea, right? We actually have done use that in the past, but that's another story. The impact here is mainly on the fact that you will not be able to use postal codes anymore as a targeting option. You cannot use specific addresses anymore, and your radius will have to be at least 15 kilometers in order to do your targeting. The 15 kilometers is the example we're giving for Belgium. This might change a bit on the country you are for a bunch of reasons, but the zip code and the specific address, you cannot do that in any other country anymore. So the only country-specific difference is the amount of kilometers. So keep that in mind when you're targeting. Obviously, you can still choose city. You can still say 40 kilometers around London. That's also possible, but a lot more detail is not possible anymore. Good. Now, as far as interests are concerned, it's getting a bit muddier, right? So let's say you're looking for a social media expert. What you'll not be able to do is to use discriminatory interests from the Facebook group of interests. But in this case, for instance, you will still be able to use interests like pay-per-click, search engine marketing, advertising, viral marketing, Twitter. I'm just reading from the list here. So all those interests are still available. But some interests that you could have been using in the past and which could be used to discriminate against people, those will not be available anymore. But if you set up your ad, if you have clicked the case of special ads category, you don't have to worry. All the interests which are available to you within the Facebook Ads Manager, you can choose. It's just that certain interests that used to be available are now not available anymore. Okay. Justine asks whether there's a list of available interests. Yes, the list is there, but you have to go into Facebook Ads Manager. So it's You don't want to print out this list, Justine, because it's still massive, right? But once you set up your ad, once you go into Facebook Ads Manager, if you click there, you'll see the list. And you just start typing. If you give marketing, it will give you all the interests that are related to that, and you just click on those that you want to use. That's a better way of using it. All right, there's a question. It's a good question from Luca on triggering the data point. Where are you referring to? Saved audience. Amongst other things, I was referring to that, but I'll come back to that in a second, Luca, because we're going to go in detail in that. Okay, now I see there's a question, the question tab. Let me check on that. Okay, you repeated it in the chat. Thanks, Luca. I might not have been paying attention, but we'll come back to that in a second. When I say in a second, I actually mean the next slide. Maybe just to explain that, what are custom audiences? Because maybe not all of you have already used custom audiences. You can actually use, if you use a Facebook pixel, and that's why it was important to talk about the Facebook pixel before, you can actually start tracking those people who have visited a specific vacancy on your website, or maybe your employer brand page, or another page on your website. If you put a pixel on there, you can actually use and build an audience based on the people who have visited that page in the last 180 days. Okay, so there's a time limit on there, but if they visit your page in the last 180 days, you can actually tell Facebook to either retarget them. That's the easiest way of using a custom audience, but you can actually also use that audience to do other things. Like, for instance, make a lookalike audiences. We'll come back to that in a second. That's one kind of custom audience you can use. The other one is also, you could load, for instance, you could upload a list of your 500 best customers in order to target those in Facebook. That's something which was available before the 7th of December. That is still available now, but very important. If, for instance, in that list, you would put information about age or about gender, Facebook will not take that data into account when they upload that list. And we would also strongly advise you to not put that data in that list, because it just might be sending out the wrong signals to the Facebook algorithm. So if you upload a list, if you have data on gender, if you have data on specific addresses or on age, we would advise you not to upload that, but just basically limit your data that you upload to name, first name, maybe private email, or even a phone number if you would have it. That's probably going to be enough for Facebook to actually identify those people, so you can target them or you can market or advertise towards them, but we would not put extra data on there. Now, once you have a custom audience, be that because you uploaded a list or because the people you visited, you can actually use that to make what is called a lookalike audience. And what Facebook will then do is, let's just assume you have an audience of 1,000 people who have visited your website. You can tell Facebook to actually make and find people who are similar to those 1,000 people. And let's say, you tell Facebook, look, I want 1% of the population in Belgium who are the most similar to these 1,000 people, right? That's called a lookalike audience. I think most of the people in the webinar today will know what it means. Again, if you don't know what it means, this is very powerful. Just go check out one of our other webinars to do so. Now, and we'll share the link to those a bit later on. This lookalike audience is impacted by the special ad audiences. So what is being special ad category? What does that mean? Is that, yes, you'll still be able to make those. If you have a custom audience, you'll still be able to make what is called a special ad audience, which actually is a name for a lookalike audiences, but not taking into account the elements in the custom audience which are discriminatory. So Let's explain that very easily. Let's say you have a custom audience and you are targeting a young user base because basically you're selling makeup to teenagers. Okay? If you would have custom audience of teenagers or people between the age of 20 and 22, right? If you would make a lookalike audiences based on that, the chances are very high that your lookalike audiences will also be people between 20 and 22, right? Because a lookalike audience will actually take age into account. If you're making a special ad audiences, even if your custom audience has a very specific age range, the special ad audience will make an audience and will not take age into account. That's a big impact, right? On your targeting possibilities. But we've done some tests and we'll come back into that in the next 5 minutes. But I just noticed a question from Sarah. Okay, Sarah is asking whether when making a lookalike, or in this case, a special ad audiences, whether we advise using 1% or 10%. That's actually the other end. And you can choose anything in between. Sarah, I'm going to give you a very ambiguous answer. It depends, right? And as you, if you followed some of our webinars before, you know that we always tend to test. In this case, I would really test between 1%, 3%, and 10%. I would set up 3 different audiences. Sorry, 3 different ad sets, because you have to define that in your ad set. I would set up 3 different ad sets and then see what's working best for your specific vacancy. Okay, now, what are the learnings we have? I'm just checking. Okay, thanks. They're from Sarah. Now, Facebook announced this beginning of September, so we knew this was coming. We've actually put some experiments on there. What did we do? Actually, what I just described here, we had a specific vacancy for some of our customers. We made a campaign where we ticked the box for special ad categories. So we followed all the rules there. So we made lookalike, or we made special ad audiences, not lookalike audiences. And then we duplicated that campaign, and we made the campaign using not the special ad category, but kind of using the standard or the same targeting tools that everybody has, right? It was very interesting to see there when we ran both of these campaigns. So we did kind of an A/B testing, for lack of a better word. When we tested that, we actually noticed that the cost per click was quite similar. So we paid the same amount per clicks. Then that, when we say cost to clicks, that means clicks going to the vacancy page. So from leaving Facebook to a vacancy page, the click-through we had though, so was doubled. So we had much more click-through on the special ad categories than we had on the non-special ad categories. And this is a bit counterintuitive, but I'll explain that in a second. And really interesting, our applications doubled, or even went in some cases times 5. And this is actually what we were trying to explain earlier when I showed you the slide with the narrow casting versus the broad targeting. This has been confirmed with the tests that we've done, is by actually targeting broader, right? You are able to reach a more interested audience, or more interesting, audiences who are also more interested, hence they are applying more. But what's important is we did use custom audiences from before. So we were using data that we have built up in the past to actually apply here and to push our targeting. So this is not kind of going through completely starting from scratch. We did use our data, which we had from the past, to run the campaigns, but it just goes to show if you have the right set of data, even an impact, quite a big impact from the special ad categories, could work the other way around and actually push up your results. Now, there's a couple of things you can do, and I hope, again, I'm checking here, but no questions yet. So that means everything must be very, very clear. Now, you're in this webinar because you're interested to understand how you can actually manage the special ad categories. And there's three options, right? The first option is that you start really thinking about how you to set up your ad, right? Basically meaning use the creative elements in your advertising to actually make it very clear on what you're targeting for. And that might be by kind of pictures you use to show a young team, to show a dynamic team, to show maybe, just to also show your team, so it'll attract similar people. But it could also be the language you're using in your advertising, the emojis. Just think about what is the kind of audience you want to attract, and use your creative elements as a first filter. And that's really important because you want to make sure that the people that click on your ad are the right people. Because once people are onto your page, you're also going to use that data, that pixel data, to improve your campaigns. So you want to use your advertising as a filter to make sure you attract the right audience. The second part, which is also very important, is that you need to start thinking more from a funnel perspective. Now, you're all recruiters. You know that you have a funnel. When people apply to your vacancy, not everybody gets hired. Why is that? Because you have 20 people applying, then you have your own selection process. You might say, look, these 10 people are not good enough. We're only going to continue with these 10. Of these 10, maybe 3 people stop themselves because they found another job. And of the 7, there's only 2 people you're going to hire. So you have a natural funnel into your recruitment process already. Now, you should apply that thinking also the way you do your campaigns, right? And the way this works is that you should not only push out advertising with vacancies, but also think about the fact that maybe there's a couple of people, no, there's surely a couple of people out there who are not even aware of your company, who are not even aware of what your company does, on why your company might be an interesting employer. Let's call that the discover phase. Now, if you're in the discover phase and you're just talking about your company, that is not a special ad category, because you're talking about your company, you're talking about what your company does, you're talking about the kind of people who work at your company. So keep that in mind, that because that will able to allow you to have a much broader reach, right? And not necessarily have to use a special ad category. If you like this funnel thinking, if you're interested in how to kind of apply that to your own set of data, please check out one of the other webinars. I'm just going to see whether maybe Aaron can share the link to our to register for to our academy. So I'll talk about our academy in a second, but that's a place where you can find all the data, all our data-driven all our white papers, all our know-how that we've grouped. So thanks for sharing that, Aaron. Now, if you're serious about setting up the right set of data, you cannot forget to install Google Analytics nor Google Tag Manager onto your website. These are all free tools which will actually help you to set up your campaigns in a proper way, so you can do the analysis on that and use that data. And you've probably guessed it, we're big fans of data, right? To use that data to basically set up your future campaigns. And I've just heard there's another question from Justine. So Justine is asking, okay, so the question from Justine is, if we set up a campaign in discover phase, will you be allowed to target on job titles, or how would you then target your audience? That's a very good question. Now, I'm going to have to refer that to another point in time, right? Because we also have another webinar on specifically on targeting, which is still, if I remember correctly, using the old opportunities on targeting, but actually you could use that still to target in the discover phase. We do not advise using job titles. That's actually my immediate answer. Do not make the mistake of using job titles when you target in Facebook, because there's only very, very few people who share their job title with Facebook. So immediately restrict your audience too narrow. So you have to start thinking about interests. You have to start thinking about other data sets you could use for doing that. But please do not, use job titles at that stage. Now, we've talked about data, and I just want to share one thing with you, because we haven't yet talked about our software, which is brilliant. If I say so myself, we've built this software because we know it's very complicated to do recruitment advertising on Facebook. And this is just one brief look at what our software can do. But it will allow you, if you're looking for a specific job, like for instance a barista, you'll be able to click on all the categories we've defined from jobs. In this category, it would be the hospitality category. In this case, it would be the hospitality category. You can then click that data, and that will allow you to use all the data from our more than 6,600 campaigns to actually help your recruitment and to improve your recruitment. We'll just maybe briefly go live and show you how that works. Let me check that you can see my screen here. I'll log into our software and just choose a dummy vacancy. And basically, we'll help you to get started from scratch. We'll help you to set up your advertising, be that Instagram, be that, so you can choose Instagram format. You can adapt your text here. So you can write the text that you want. You can choose your visual. We'll automatically add your logo. We'll automatically add a banner, or you can hide that banner to actually show what kind of candidates you're looking for. Again, helping you with the filtering. We've talked about the targeting. So this is where basically you can actually use all our data sets to help you set up your targeting. Will help you set up a high-performing landing page, because we know what needs to go into that landing page. And more importantly, will also help you with the candidates that are coming in. So basically, every candidate that comes and applies to your vacancy through Facebook or through Instagram will be visible here. You'll be able to see what answers they've given onto the questions you've posted automatically with our chatbot. And then if you want to kind of make sure that you have a follow-up interview with Monica, you just drag Monica to the category of in discussion, and then you'll keep a very nice overview of all your candidates in the same software. So it's really going to help you a lot with setting up your campaigns from scratch. But not only that, because it's the beauty of the system, and I'll go back to the, okay, now one point I want to add here is that if you register with the link that we've just given you, you come into our software, you can click on the bottom left to access our academy, and in the academy, that's where you'll be able to see all the other relevant webinars or data-driven white papers. We have some tools in there that you can use to basically help you set up your own campaign while you're at it. So please register. We'll give you lots of interesting free, because all the data we're sharing here is free, and you can use them there. And just to wrap up, not only will our software help you with easily set up your campaign, but it will also automatically do any kind of testing you want. So it will test visual A versus test visual B. It will then also measure which visual is working better, and it will put the budget automatically on the best performing ad. So it's really going to boost your own advertising set if you want that. Good. And by the way, because you're in this webinar, you get the software for free for 2 weeks if you register today. So another reason to register if the data in there wasn't reason enough. Good. Right. Yes. Thanks again for sharing that link, Aaron. Now, we're actually at the end of today's presentation. It's exactly 45 minutes, as we promised. I'm just going to be looking at the screen here to know whether there's any more questions. So any questions you might have for me, now's the time. But it looks like my explanation was crystal clear. Oh no, there's one question from Laura. Let's see here. All right, thank you, Laura. Very interesting. That's great feedback to have, which reminds me, I'll just launch a poll. We have another poll, and that's the final poll on just getting your feedback on this webinar. So how likely are you to recommend this webinar to a friend or colleague? So please score me as high as possible. If not, they're going to fire me from this job. And there's not going to be any more webinars in the future. No pressure there. Let's have a look. Okay, well, getting some good scores in there. That's very nice to see. All right, well, thank you very much. It looks like there's no more questions. So there you go. We'll end the webinar here. Thank you for your time. And please stay in touch if you ever want to know about future webinars. Go to our LinkedIn page and follow our LinkedIn page, and we'll keep you up to date. Oh, sorry, I just noticed there was one more question from Raluca. Did I miss it? Yes. Okay, so Raluca, at the moment, we are seeing actually better results than we used to have. Like I mentioned, and like the examples I gave, we see higher click-through, we see higher application. So at the moment, we're very happy with those results. And I noticed there's another question in the question tab. Let me check here. No, I think we've done all the questions. Okay, good. But then we'll close down the webinar. Thank you for your time, and hope to see another webinar, or even better, using our software.